Put your faith in the light.
Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. This is Lightblade. Well guys, in this one we are going to be talking about a massive nerf to a lot of bosses from all the dungeons in this Mythic Plus rotation. So I think this is actually warranted. There was a lot of fights that were really unfun, especially to healers because of how weak healing is this season. There's a lot of rot scenarios that these bosses did too much damage. And they are also going to nerf one item that was used to cheese some of these fights, you know? Okay, so what are we going to talk about in this video is, like I said, that item, nerfs on Brackenhide Hollow, House of Infusion, Neltharus, Neltharian Slayer, Uldaman, Underrot, and Vortex Pinnacle. So basically every single dungeon with the exception of Freehold. Okay, let's talk about first of the item nerf. So this is the Immature Venom Sac. This was an item from Vanilla that was used to just remove a poison effect on you. No longer works in Mythic Plus dungeons or raids. So this allowed you to cheese some mechanics, especially the one, for example, in Neltharian Slayer with Naraxis, you know, the worm boss that put that nasty poison on yourself. So you could remove it with this item. It no longer works, but don't worry, they are going to nerf the boss in these patch notes. Okay, let's talk about nerfs in dungeons. So the first one is to Brackenhide Hollow, and this is to the first boss of this instance. So for Nashtu, this is one of the gnolls of the first encounter, the Rogue Gnoll. So they're nerfing the ability that's called Nash Frenzy. The periodic damage is reduced by 25%. So this is the ability where the gnoll jumps to everyone in the group, does damage, and then leaves a nasty dot that the healer has to heal over 90% of the health of the player to remove. So this is really punishing, not at the start of the encounter, but whenever it's like in the middle part of the encounter. You know, this happens, that fight is really hectic. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of kicks, like casts that can kill someone, you know, and not allow the healer to get that person over 90% health. So I think this is just going to help them catch up on that fight, you know, and I think it's a really good nerf. The next one is to Decatriarch Wratheye. So this thing is the last boss of the instance, and it's the one that puts the totems down. So the first change is to Withered Eruption. Damage reduced by 10%. Yes, I think this was guaranteed a nerf because this thing is scaled with the amount of stacks that you had on the totems. Normally you will have like one stack of the totem, but still it did a massive amount of damage, especially in tyrannical keys. If you had one stack of this, someone was going to die in your group unless they had like a strong defensive or something like that. But with this nerf, it's a bit more tolerable. You can maybe have one stack and still survive the explosion. As Red Paladins, we were normally the last man standing here because we do have a lot of tools to survive AoE damage. But yeah, it wasn't fun, you know, seeing the whole group die. Okay, the next one is Rotburst Totem. This is the totem that it puts down. You know, in the past it used to cast the Rotting Burst every 5 seconds. Now it's going to cast every 7 seconds. I think this is really good change because the thing just, I always felt casted too fast, you know, so it was really punishing for classes that, for example, didn't have instant damage, so classes that now can ramp a bit and just kill the totem. And it also like forced in the really high keys people to just save the beacon, you know, the Sargha trinket for that totem just to kill it. So that's, in my opinion, a bad design whenever you need a specific thing to just get past a mechanic. So I think this change is going to be good, and it's just going to make the totems die easier. Now let's go to the next dungeon. Okay, the next nerf is to Halls of Infusion. This is to Watcher Iridius. This is for the ability Power Overload. This is the first boss of the instance. So Power Overload is that dot that the boss puts on you, and after the dot runs out, you put a little like circle. Well, not little, like medium-sized circle, and in the second phase, a huge circle on that deals damage to anyone that's in it. The number of targets is going to be reduced to 2. It was 3. So yeah, I think this nerf is really good because the first phase, it was tolerable. You can normally like mass dispel the thing and everyone runs out of the circle, you know, you take damage and whatever. But the second phase was really a problem because if 3 people stack together with a huge with a dot, you know, you dispel it, everyone has to run away from that huge circle that's ticking, the damage stacks, and it was really rough, you know. So normally people had to spread out, and then your healer couldn't heal everyone because sometimes people were out of range, especially, for example, if your healer was an evoker. It was really rough to heal, and it was a really annoying fight. So reducing the number of targets hit by this thing is going to reduce the area denial that this ability will do. I think that's going to be fine. It's also making the boss die faster because the other person that doesn't have the Power Overload can now just keep hitting the boss, you know, and just making it die a lot faster. And they're also going to nerf the periodic damage of this ability by 33%, so you're no longer going to rot, you know. For example, if you move away from your group and you maybe are out of range of your healer, you're not going to rot as hard as you did before, which I think is really good. Pretty good change. Now let's go to the next dungeon. Okay, so guys, the next nerfs are for Neltharus. There is a ton of nerfs here and they were very needed. This place was super punishing to do. First, we have nerfs to some trash. They are nerfing the health of Iron Touch Commander by 15%, Kalashi Davaver by 11%, and Kalashi Warden by 11% as well. These are simple HP changes, but they make the dungeon go a lot faster, so it's easier to time. Good changes in general. Okay, after those, there we have nerfs to every single boss of Neltharus because all of them were horrible, but personally I hate Magmatus the most, you know, the elephant boss. So this guy lasted too long, it did too much damage, and it did, like, eventually it was going to do unhealable rot damage to your whole group. It was just a nightmare boss. Okay, so they're reducing the health of this thing by 10%. That's really good. Like I said, it lasted too long. The magma eruption periodic damage is going to be reduced by 25%. This was especially punishing if the boss lasted up to like the 3rd tentacle or 4th tentacle, because you weren't able to heal this dot, you know. The healer was just going to struggle too much to heal it. As a red paladin, sometimes you survive and were like the last man standing killing this boss, but it wasn't a fun fight to do, so I'm happy to see this thing nerfed. After that, they're reducing the lava wave damage by 14.3%. Normally, you don't want to get hit by this slow-moving lava wave, but sometimes it happens, you know. If I myself have been hit by this thing, and with this nerf, you probably will survive with a sliver of health, but still try to dodge it. The next one is Lava Spray. Lava Spray is going to be reduced by 21.6%. This is just the targeted nuke that the boss does to a person. If the fight went long, this combined with the magma eruption was just a death sentence unless you had a strong defensive, you know. So I'm really happy to see this nerf because this boss was just too lethal if those things like magma eruption and Lava Spray overlapped. Next one is Magma Love. So it now fires a pool of lava every 6.5 seconds instead of every 5 seconds. This is that lava pool that creates area denial. This was really annoying, especially for melee characters that couldn't like use range abilities. You know, as red valleys, we do have a lot of range abilities, so we could still hit the boss. But sometimes it just went to Narnia, you know, with a charge, and you couldn't even hit it that way. So Magma Love now is less area denial, which means the boss is kind of easier to do for melee characters. Next up, we have Forge Master Gorek. So Forge Master Gorek was the boss that has the anvil and puts the little swirlies everywhere, you know, when he jumps. They're nerfing this boss health by 10%, which I think is really good. It's also one of those bosses that if it lasts too long, the healer is going to run out of cooldowns and then everyone's going to die. The Blazing Hammer, this is the ability that he does whenever he hits the anvil, and it does AoE pulsing damage to everyone in the group, is going to be reduced by 20%. This is really good because, yeah, this thing just did massive amount of damage to everyone, and it was really hard for your healer to catch up sometimes. So really good nerfs there. The next one is to the last boss of the instance. This is to Warlord Sargha. Health reduced by another 10% because, yes, every single boss in this place was an annoying nightmare. And they're also nerfing the Molten Pool periodic damage reduced by 20%, which is really good, I think. This on top of, let's say, the curse dot that you got from picking up a treasure was really annoying if you didn't have a cursed spell. The person was just getting nuked down by the dot. I feel this was a guarantee nerf to have, you know. This reminds me of an ability of BFA, the first boss of King's Rest. That big serpent, gold serpent that put the same debuff on you. It was just a massive dot, and back then I don't think it got nerfed, but I'm really happy to see it nerfed now in this ability in this boss. So now let's go to the next dungeon. Okay, so we have nerfs for Neltharion's Lair. So first one is for trash. This is for Bileshock Crawler. This is one of those little ad thingies at the start of the dungeon, you know, the little spiders that just explode and do damage. The explosion will no longer scale with Mythic Plus key level, so the pool that the little ad leaves will no longer scale with Mythic Plus level. That means if you stand in that pool, you won't instantly die if like 3 ads die at the same time, and you stand there for 1 second, which I think is a good change. Next one is to Rockmora. Rockmora is the first boss, and that's a beast of a boss. Crystalline Ground damage reduced by 25%. This nerf is not as impactful as the other ones from the other dungeons because, well, a lot of people already know that you don't have to move in Crystalline Ground. I think this mostly helps with melee characters to reposition a bit. You know, sometimes you get knocked too far from the boss to hit either the boss or the ads. So now you might be able to just move a little bit, you know, take some less damage and to reposition to hit the boss and the ads, you know, just to kill the boss faster. So I don't think this nerf is too impactful, but it's nice to see. And the next one is to Naraxa, so the worm boss. Worm boss has always been like one of the most annoying bosses in this place. Toxic wrench damage is reduced by 25%. So that poison is no longer going to nuke you down as hard as before, you know, in combination with throw rocks that sometimes happens, that could be lethal. Now it's going to be a little less punishing to deal with, you know. You're no longer going to just stack poison removal classes just to deal with this boss. You can now go with most compositions, maybe have 1 or 2 poison removals and you should be fine. As red balance, this boss was not a big problem, you know, because we could also use our poison dispel on ourselves, but I've always seen a lot of people just get nuked down because of the rocks and the poison at the same time. So good change overall for all classes. Now let's go to the next dungeon. This is Uldaman. So Uldaman has some nice changes as well, because there are some bosses there which were just annoying and dealt too much damage. First one is to Sentinel Talondras. This one is the one that dealt too much damage. Earthen Shards, periodic damage reduced by 20%. So this bleed was just super punishing. Like the person that had this thing just got nuked down super fast. Personally, if I got it and I used my Shield of Vengeance, the thing was gone in like 1-2 seconds. That was it. Shield of Vengeance was gone. So this dot is going to be nerfed by 20%. It's meaning that people can actually use defenses and survive the combination of this and let's say the stomp, you know. So I'm really happy to see that. And now not everyone has to be a dwarf, because I'm sorry, but dwarves are ugly, so I'm not going to become a dwarf just because of a mechanic, you know, or the stacking like evokers. Evokers remove bleeds and stuff, but still, having to need certain things to deal with a mechanic, I think is bad design. It should be just like a small bonus, but not needed to deal with a mechanic. So good change. Next one is Emberon. This is the robot boss. Seeking Flame visual updated and it's much easier to see. So we can see here in this clip. You remember those little orbs that were really translucent? So those orbs are no longer like orbs, and they are like those like flame pillars, you know. So now you can actually see them. I've always complained and streamed that those balls were just too hard to see, you know. They were almost transparent and they kind of blended with the ground. So it was really rough to like discern them from where you were running, you know. So now it's easier to see, so you can't like bump into them by mistake. So I'm really happy about this change. Visual clarity is actually something that people don't think about when the bosses, you know. For example, in the first season in Court of Stars, after they fixed the last boss of Court of Stars, it was just such an easy fight, but before that it was just a nightmare. So I think this is going to be similar in this situation. Now let's go to the next dungeon. Okay, for the next dungeon we have a nerf in Underrot. This is to the Grotesque Horror. This is the worm, you know, the worm that does 2 casts. One is a single target nuke to someone and the other one is a AoE nuke to the whole group that is really punishing. So the cast time is increased to 1.5 seconds and instead of 1 second. I think this is just good because it was just too fast. Sometimes this thing could catch you in a global if you didn't have, like, let's say your normal interrupt and you wanted to stun the thing, and if you were in a global, sometimes you couldn't do it because you were stuck there, you know. So increasing the cast to 1.5 I think is just really nice, so those situations don't happen. And the last nerf is to Vortex Pinnacle, to the last boss of the instance, and it's for that little ad that it spawns. So the Skyfall Nova now deals 20% reduced damage, which is really good because this little ad, if it stayed aloft long enough and let's say a Chain Lightning appeared, the person that was getting Chain Lightning either had to pop a really strong defensive to survive it on top of the Skyfall Nova like AoE, or they died, you know. So I think this is just a good change. It's going to make that boss less punishing if your group doesn't have enough DPS to nuke down the ads super fast, you know. And well guys, that's all of the nerfs we got. Let me know down in the comments below, do you think these nerfs are enough, or do you think there's some bosses they missed in this tuning past? And well, if you like my content, subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. Thanks for watching everyone.